Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon. Today, we're going to have a great episode for you. We're going to do some writing craft recaps, and we are going to talk about creating character-driven stories by talking about two of the most popular TV shows that has hit our screens in the past little while, which is House of the Dragon and The Last of Us. But before we get into that, I am Marie Mullaney. I have a YouTube world building channel and I'm a fantasy author. And with me, as always, is my co-host Drake.
I'm Max Alexander Drake, award-winning novelist, teach writing all over the world. And I just realized, because I never really looked at myself in the mirror, now that I'm looking at myself in this, I am sporting my hick today. I got my hick ball cap on, my American t-shirt, my flannel. So I am right out of the South today. Didn't really realize that.
And if you like the South, and even if you don't, hit the like button down below. And
yeah, because Southerners hate it when you hit that like button. So don't be hitting that like button because that'll just, I'm sorry, Southerners love it. Sorry. Southerners love it when you hit that like. No, wait. No, they hate it. So you want to hit it. Right. I didn't think that through. So
just hit that like button.
Just hit the like button. If you hit the like button, I promise I won't do my Southern country accent for the rest of this episode. We can say that.
All right, so let's talk about writing craft recaps. So we have spoken about a couple of the things that we're going to talk about today before.
Well, they both came up in my writers group last night, and it's not like they haven't come up before, but really had to readdress them again. So I figure if it's readdressing with them, it's time to readdress it here.
Absolutely.
And they're two simple concepts that I really push my clients and students and everything to think about. They're not hard. This shouldn't be controversial because there are controversies like, don't use adverbs or screw it, use adverbs and stuff like that. There's all of those. But these two, I don't think so. So the two things that I kind of hammered on last night were inner monologue and speech tags, and one aspect of speech tags. And I think speech tags is easier, so I'm gonna start there. Basically, the thing that irks me is when people use a speech tag in a sentence that has a bunch of other actions. So in other words, they'll say, "Hey, how you doing?" Sally said as she got up and walked across the room and poured herself a cup of coffee. Like the Sally said literally adds nothing to the sentence. Because the only reason why Sally said it there is to show that Sally said, "How you doing this morning?" But if it's all one paragraph and it's, quote, "How you doing this morning," close quote, Sally got up and walked across the room and got herself a cup of coffee, then we also know that Sally said that. And so, and I'm not talking about, because you had brought up earlier something like, Sally said with a smile. So okay, little things like that.
So if you're saying something that describes how the person's saying it, then keep the speech tag. The reason why you keep the speech tag is because you don't want to say he smiled as a speech tag or he laughed as a speech tag. Like, those things jar.
Well, it wouldn't be a speech tag, it'd be an action tag. So you'd put a period at the end of, like, "How you doing this morning," period, close quote, capital, "she smiled." But for me, it's that awkwardness of, wait a minute, is it a speech tag? Is it not a speech tag? Can you actually say that?
And a two-word sentence.
Smiling affecting that or anything like that. So so those, it becomes very awkward.
Yes. Those, my opinion is, stick to, like, she said with a smile or he said with a laugh or whatever, like, just use that descriptor. But if it's an actual action, just use the action tag.
Right. There's just no reason. You're adding bloat to the story that does literally nothing. Yeah. And we want to cut out all of our overused stuff, and you're going to overuse the word "said." You're just going to. And so if the sentence has extra stuff in it, just cut out the "said," because you don't even change the sentence. He said as he walked across the room, he walked across the room. Like, doesn't change anything. So
the one thing I do want to say about cutting out repeated word uses when we're talking about "said" is, please do not cut out the word "said's" repeated word uses by using synonyms.
Right.
because I have seen that too, where people go like, he orated,
Yeah, because
unless
then you
he's
start getting
standing in
really
front of a
dumb.
crowd, and he's actually orating. Don't do that.
Yeah, because
I
then you
have
become a
written,
thesaurus.
yeah, I have written he declaimed, but the dude was standing in front of a crowd delivering a speech. Declaimed is the correct word. Right?
Except to play a little devil's advocate, I
Okay.
would rather describe what that looks like and feels like. And so instead of just being telly and saying he declaimed, I would rather say, he punctuated his words by slamming his fist on his, on the small child next to him, whatever. So just saying, you can describe some things and really throw
Yeah. Yeah.
some better descriptors and better emotions and everything into the story.
100% you can.
So, and it's one of the reasons why I don't ever write the word said, like none. And I don't recommend that anybody follow me on that. I say this all the time. I am one of the only published authors that does not use speech tags at all. Not a single one. I've got one story that was published in it, but it had reasons that it had to be there. But the reality is I don't use them at all. And it's actually bad. There's times where it would actually be better if I would get off my high horse and just write the word said. But since 20 years ago, I planted my flag in that, on that hill, that's one of the hills that I decided I was going to die on. And it has caused me a lot of grief at times. So don't do it, but use them less. Definitely action tags are more inviting and exciting and interesting and immersive and everything else for the reader, as opposed to John said. And that's why I've actually, so like last night when we were going through some stuff, there was a whole page that this person just had dialogue, and maybe the occasional said, whatever.
Mm.
And the industry calls that talking heads.
Yes.
Where you just got two heads that are floating in midair and we can't see anything around them. Their lips are moving. I actually have stopped calling it in my writers groups and with my students talking heads.
Mm.
Have switched over to exclusively calling it missed opportunity.
Mm.
So as an example, there was a line that this one character said. It was the narrating character. She had basically been chased out of the forest by these monsters and she's got to go back. And she had marked the thing by leaving a necklace in the park because there's someone out there in danger. And so she gets some help and she's going to go out there. And so they get there. And I don't remember what the exact line was, but she said something about not wanting to go back or whatever. It was that line. And that's it. It was talking heads. And it was in the section of talking heads. I said, this is a perfect example. What is she feeling? Like you say, I don't want to go back, but I'm inside her. Like literally, what are the emotions running through her head? What, is she terrified? There's all this stuff. So really what talking heads to me is just a missed opportunity to expand and the story and make it immersive. And the author was like, oh yeah, I could write blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, look at that. Like it's so easy to avoid these missed opportunities because that's really what they are. They're missed opportunities to show actions, to paint better pictures, to show deeper emotions. That's why I almost never write a line of dialogue by itself. It always has, and it's also why my paragraphs have gotten fatter and fatter and fatter because I'm doing more and more things within that paragraph. But it's also why, people enjoy reading me, except for those few that really want bare bone stories. I have had a few of those where they're like, you describe too much for me. I'm like, okay, great. There are 1,000 other writers out there that don't describe crap. Go read them. Like, I don't, necessarily need you one reader. I'm looking for people who want to watch the movie in their head, who want that immersive experience. And so again, this is all subjective. So if you're the type of writer where you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I don't want to expand myself. I just want to have just dialogue, next chapter, dialogue, then write it that way. There is nothing stopping you. But if you want a bit more immersion, then I would suggest not doing that. So yeah, so that's one of the things that came up. And maybe we should call this section like crap that came up in Drake's writers group last night, because it seems like every time there's stuff.
But I do think that it is worth talking about like dialogue often because people do, like I've seen it a lot, like a lot of speech tags with then an action. I'm like, just use the action tag. And talking heads is a trap that a lot of writers fall into, like a
Yep.
lot.
Oh, even published books.
Yeah.
They're just all over the place.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I just feel they're missed opportunities. And
Absolutely.
then the other one was inner monologue. And it took me until last year to figure out how to really teach, because I use a lot of inner monologue. I use one or two on every single page. There are people, and again, anything you do is always going to piss off somebody. So I've had people come up to me and it's like, man, you're a really good writer, but I cannot read stories that have inner monologue. I just refuse. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because I was told it was wrong. I mean, they don't really have a reason, but it is one of those controversial statements. But I always struggled trying to explain. And last year, one of the girls in my writers group that's been, doing my class for about 8 years now, she's constantly been hammering on me like, you got to explain it to me better. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And I've done this and I've done that, but I finally actually figured out a really good way last year to kind of explain it to her. And now it's my go-to. It's my standard as far as this is concerned. And it's when you're thinking about inner monologue, you can't treat just like dialogue, because it'll start sounding campy or to start sounding on the nose. Like last night, the reason why this came up is one of the guys, he had met a nobleman who was basically just dressed like everyone else and doing everything else, and he's going to have to play this game against him. And he didn't really describe the nobleman. He just said it was a nobleman. And then in inner monologue, he goes, but he looks just like us. And I'm like, so first of all, you haven't described anyone in the scene. So I don't know what that means. They could all be lizard people for all I know. Because literally, he's like, the only thing he described was, the POV is in this pit surrounded by a crowd, and the crowd is looking at him. But that's it. And I'm like, he looks just like us, but I don't know what us looks like. It's this, vague anamorphic blob, and you describe nothing. And so I'm like, if you describe it, we're going to know. And it's, and then you maybe make a comment of that's a little less on the nose, like anything. I mean, it could be, I bet he doesn't wear these clothes at home or whatever. I mean, there's so many other ways that you could do it other than just right on the nose. And so for me, when I'm thinking about inner monologue, I always ask the question, because inner monologue could absolutely be written as narration. That's why a lot of people are against it. A lot of people are against it because they're like, well, you can just write it as narration, because you could narrate and the nobleman looked just like them. Like, or, it amazed POV character because the nobleman didn't look any different from anyone else he knew. Like, you can narrate that without going into inner monologue. My question is always, does it impact the reader more as narration or as inner monologue? Because some lines absolutely make more impact on the reader if it's internal. So as example, the monster story with the forest, the first one I was talking about, there was a thing where she narrated, it was right at that moment too, that same thing that I was describing. So it was like, she was glad that she had Bob with her, because, she didn't want to be out here to begin with, comma, especially not alone. And I'm like, okay, no problem with that. But what if instead she was, it's something like, and it was more showy than she was glad Bob. I'm paraphrasing everything. But instead, now we just end it with, she was glad that Bob was with her, because she didn't want to go back, period. And then you drop an inner monologue, especially not alone. Like, even though they're the same words, one is just narration that you read. The second one, when you pop it out and you force the reader to hear it as internal monologue, because that's what the italics does. It makes me hear the words different. It's personal. It's her now saying, especially not alone, as opposed to especially not alone. Because you read it in narration, you just read it in your narration voice. You read it in inner monologue or dialogue, and you read it in that voice in your head, and it changes. It changes the impact of it.
So I'll tell you why I generally recommend against inner monologue. And it's not because I refuse to read, obviously, I mean, I read a lot of writers, including you, that use inner monologues. I've got nothing against inner monologue. However, I read a lot of writing where the inner monologue is literal paragraphs, sometimes multiple paragraphs. At that point, it truly is a monologue. And we've gone from a talking head to a
talking brain
sitting in a jar, spouting the thoughts of the character at me. And I'm like, I'm bored and no longer interested.
You just took me back to Steve Martin's The Man with Two Brains, where they had brains in jars and all of that. But anyway, no, you're right. That's why all my inner monologue is usually just a couple words long. Every once in a while, I will allow the character, like if the character's trying to make a decision, we've all done that where we'll actually go, and this would all be in my head, but it'd be like, okay, should I choose the yellow one or the red one? I mean, the yellow one has this aspect, but we've all done that. And so I'll occasionally allow my characters to do something like that, but only if it is a conversation that is very organic and very natural and must be held inside that character's head. And because it gives you insight on the character struggling between this decision.
Yeah, but even then, I would say break it up, with actions, break it up with narration as well. Because as you say, you can do a lot of inner monologue type things. I mean, I do all of my inner monologue type things in narration, all of it.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot of that in narration, and then you can just sparingly spice in some italics for inner monologue.
Or not do it 2-3 times on every page.
Yes, but not whole paragraphs. Not
No, because they're always like 1 or 2 words, like I just said, like in that example, especially not alone. I mean,
I read the beginning of a chapter. I read the beginning of a chapter that I was critting, and the first 5 paragraphs were all in italics with like 1 sentence in between. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah. And I've definitely started chapters with inner monologue. Like one of my favorites, which is the prologue to the book that's come out in July, that I've cut, and I don't even know. You'll get this chapter, but I still haven't decided exactly where it's going to go. I think it's going to be the epilogue of book 2. I mean, think about that. I wrote a prologue to book 1, and I'm now going to put it as the epilogue to book 2, because it gave away some information that, first of all, you just don't even understand, but it's more impactful after what happens in book 2, the information. But it starts off with an inner monologue of, have I given my loyalty to the just or just the victorious? And then the next line is, the thought clawed at Valame Dre's honor. Like, literally, it's him because they've won. And, as the scene unfolds, you notice that the battle is done and they've won and everything like that. And the whole chapter, he's just lamenting on, have we actually done the right thing here? Like, we won and I'm on the winning side, but does that make us right? Like, we've done some pretty horrific things here. And so that's, and so right off the bat, I throw it right in the reader's face. This is the conflict, the internal conflict of this character in the very first sentence. And so the whole chapter, now you have to deal with him. There's an external conflict too that has nothing to do with that, but he's also dealing with that internal conflict the entire time as well. And so, I've definitely started. I would definitely never say, because somebody will say that. They'll say, never start, with an like, screw you. There's no such thing as never. Well,
I'm not saying never. I'm just saying don't start with 5 paragraphs.
Oh, well, the 5 paragraphs I've never done anywhere, like ever. So
that's
the example that I was talking about when he's making a decision, it might be 2 sentences long.
Yeah.
Like, it's never been like a paragraph, like a long paragraph, because 2 sentences would be a paragraph, 1 sentence is a paragraph. But anyway, So that's the big thing with inner monologue. It's if you choose to use it. Some people just don't choose to use it, and that's fine. There's no. I personally like it because I feel that it, and I think that's the thing I love so much about writing in third person as opposed to when I write in first person. In first person, everything is inner monologue,
Yes.
everything. So you really shouldn't write an inner monologue because there's no difference.
No.
It doesn't feel, and you can do this test because nothing I say, I haven't tested out and thought about. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I say about writing and why I believe the way I believe about writing. And so when I'm writing in first person and I write something in a monologue, it doesn't read any different to me than everything else in narration, because everything is written kind of in that first person. I'm thinking this stuff as I'm narrating it as well. So it's really just kind of redundant to write inner monologue in first person. It doesn't add anything to the story, so therefore, why do it? However, the beautiful thing about inner monologue in third person is it does take you, if done correctly and with the right reasons, like, again, not just saying willy-nilly stuff, but actually things that are impactful. It takes you a little bit deeper into the character than the narration does by itself. And so it adds a dimension that doesn't exist in third person without it. And so that's why those people, they're like, oh, I'm just never going to use it. I'm like, okay, just understand that now there's a level of deepness that you're just not going to use, which is fine. And it not necessarily saying it's going to hurt the story in any way, shape, or form. It's just a tool. And it's a tool that I tend to like to use, but you don't have to use it. You can still make the building without using, you can use a different tool or whatever. But yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I'm such a huge supporter of inner monologue. I am a critic of it because most people use it incorrectly. Most people do it just like you said, where they'll have massive conversations, or they'll info dump in it, or they'll do really, like I said, on the nose kind of things where, it's like, wow, they're really greedy, aren't they? Yeah, literally, you just showed me that. Why are you thinking it now? So they'll do stuff like that is just really,
I mean, that's the other problem, right? Is like people can be very on the nose with the inner monologue, and I'm like, don't do that. Like, that just yeah, as you say, you've just shown it to me. Why tell it to me as well? But they do that with narration as well, to be fair.
Oh yeah.
They're just showing me the whole
and
scene,
dialogue.
and then they're like, and dialogue and everything, and then they narrate it. I'm like,
well, I mean, like, this also happened last night in the writers group. So this camp got attacked. Something was left behind. One of the soldiers, this young kid, took off running and ran into the tent, and then it got hit by an explosive. And one of the third party characters says, well, he just went and got himself killed. Like, yeah, like, you kind of showed that, didn't you? So yeah, it happens in dialogue, it happens in narration, it happens in inner monologue, it happens in all of them.
And it happens. One other repeated thing that I need to get off my chest because it's a bugbear for me. But the character needs to know this. So I have to show them getting the information. Otherwise, the user won't know where they got the information. I'm like, okay, cool. One sentence summary. They explained it to her. Seriously, this is the place where you tell, you don't show.
Well, and let me back up. Because you missed a piece of this. What you're talking about, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is the reader already has this information.
Yes. The reader already has the information. But
the character doesn't.
Yes. I'm like,
yeah. What I always tell people is, remember, the character ain't real. The only thing that's real is the reader. And if the real reader already has the real information, then that's all that needs to happen.
The only exception I'll say is if the other characters are lying to a character, then you need to show it. But then you're showing the reader new information because the reader knows that they're lying, right? So they're like, oh my God, they're lying to her. So you're showing the new.
But that's actually not an exception to it because that's completely different.
Exactly. But, people will say, but what if they're not telling her everything? I'm like, then, yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't talk about inner monologue without also ending it with, and for God's sakes, don't write he thought to himself. Just don't do that. Just he thought, if you have to put a speech tag in there. Or you can just understand that pretty much the industry, all genres now have accepted a, italicized first person in the middle of a third person paragraph is inner monologue, and you don't even have to write he thought.
The only time you have to write he thought is with omniscient voice, in which case it also needs actual quotes around it. Just FYI.
Single,
yeah, single quotes, yeah, for omniscient.
Yeah. And then to take that a step further, don't write omniscient. It's a dead POV. Like, nobody
if you
wants to read that
really
crap.
insist on it, that's how you do inner monologue there.
Yeah, and because technically it isn't inner monologue, it's what was said in their head.
Yes.
And so it's kind of dialogue in the brain because you're not in the brain, and that's the problem with omniscient POV is you've pushed the reader as far away from the character as you can possibly push them.
I'm reading an omniscient like thing at the moment, and I'm like, why is this an omniscient? And she's like, because magic is a sentient force that's part of the story. I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it, and you can't make magic be a POV. But magic isn't thinking anything in this freaking omniscient novel either. You don't need omniscient here.
It's still pushing the reader away from the character.
Like I hear your justification, and I'm glad you thought about it, but
right. Oh, and also your sentient magic ain't real.
Yeah, that too.
The only thing that's real is the reader. So you're doing a disservice to the only thing that's real.
Yeah.
Storytelling, and people think I'm a sellout when I say this, and that's fine. Yeah. But storytelling is about entertaining a reader. That's it.
Yep.
It's not about your characters. It's not about your world. It's not about your plot. It's not about anything. It's about how it impacts the reader.
So let's, from our inner monologue and impacting the reader, let's talk about writing good stories through having characters that the
well, let's talk about the importance of the character and character-driven stories, and why, even if you're not writing a character-driven story, the character is so vitally important.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to talk about The Last of Us and House of the Dragon. Now,
we are going to be spoilery, and I know, like, Last of Us just dropped.
Yeah.
Dropped Wednesday, or dropped on the 15th. I don't know when exactly. I think it was Wednesday. So if you haven't seen it, you may want to pause this, if it's something you're going to watch, and go watch it.
Yeah.
Because, man, now, if you played the video game, you've already been spoiled. It is exactly like the video. And actually, if you follow me on Facebook, I actually posted a picture of it, and I said, it's about time somebody finally got the formula right, which doesn't make any sense because the formula is not hard. Step one, take an IP that is so well written, that has a massive following and everybody loves it. Mm-hmm. Step two, do that.
Yeah.
There is no step three.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I think step one was and use that, do that. And step two, there is no step two, I think is what I said.
But so there are going to be spoilers for House of Dragon up to about episode 4, which is about where I stopped watching.
So what episode did they finally go to the beach and the younger brother did the fight that they didn't show that really pissed me off? I think that was 2 or 3.
Where the younger brother kind of just rampaged through everything with the most obvious plot armor in the world. That one. Yeah, that was also the one where I stopped, more or less. It's like, it's the most plot armor I have ever seen piled onto a single character in my entire life.
Well, but it was worse than that, because it was, now I'm thinking that maybe later we get a flashback of the fight. If we don't, I'm going to be like,
I don't know.
So we have this big buildup between the protagonist and the antagonist, and we're gonna fight. We're both badass. We're gonna fight. We start off with the protagonist having to plow through his army to get to him, and he's hell-bent. He doesn't care. He gets hit by arrows. He doesn't care. He's gonna get to that antagonist. We're gonna have a fight. And then we just flash forward to the hero walking out of the cave with the antagonist's head. Like, that's literally all I wanted to see. just wanted to see the fight between these two. I didn't care about the fight getting to him. I didn't care. Like, you've hyped up this one fight, and then you just skip it.
Up. Yeah. That really, it annoyed me.
And I'm like, and so I did. I stopped watching it. Now, it wasn't
yeah.
It wasn't like when I stopped watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
Because they pissed me off with a really bad writing. I eventually went back and watched it, and it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the either first or second episode, they pissed me off so bad I didn't watch it until the entire series had finished dropping, which was like, I think it had 4 seasons or something like that.
I might return to House of the Dragon eventually if I'm less busy.
Will.
If I'm less busy.
It was good.
It was good.
It wasn't great, but it was good.
The reason why I really dropped off, like, yes, that fight annoyed me. That fight really annoyed me with a because it annoyed me because that dude had so much plot armor. I was like, wow.
But see, it would have been fine. I don't think it would have affected you as much if that had been a setup for what he's going to have to deal with and use
for a big fight,
to overcome this massive obstacle of a big bad.
Yeah. Yes.
But since they skipped the big bad and he runs into the cave after all of that, after that whole plot armor fight, he runs in the cave and then he just comes walking out with the dude's head.
Yeah.
And you see nothing that happened in the cave.
My dudes. But the reason why I actually stopped watching is because I had disconnected from the characters, and I think it is due to the lots of time jumps.
Yeah.
Not one time jump, not like a skip of like, here's the character as a child, here there as an adult, or here's the character, as with Last of Us, we also have a time skip. We have a 20-year time
20 years.
But we have one time skip, not 5 of them, and the character doesn't grow in the time skip.
Yeah, I think that's the important part. I think the important part is with House of the Dragons, they're jumping, years with every episode, and they are allowing those characters to have changed and grown between when we saw them last and when we see them now. And it's different from, here she is at 5 years of age and watching her parents get murdered. And now here she is at 24 years of age and she's an urchin on the street and a thief and trying to make a living for herself. We can fill in those pieces that get her there. The jumps that they're doing, we don't understand why. It isn't so obvious of, oh, you were a rich girl when you were 5, but your parents were murdered. And now I see you at 20 and you're scratching a living as a thief on the streets. We can all go, oh, wow, you had a really crappy life. Like, we're right there. And with Joel in The Last of Us, so spoilers again, just you've been warned. But again, if you've watched the game, I was so happy. I was so terrified they were going to cut this because The Last of Us, the first video game, has the best written intro of any video game that I've ever experienced in my life. And the fact that they kept that intact, they didn't change anything. They added stuff that an audience needs that a game player doesn't.
I hate zombies, and I loved The Last of Us. Like, just,
Yeah, my wife won't watch it. She's like, I'm like, well, they're not really zombies. They're kind of plant people things. She's like, that's a zombie. I'm like, well, but I mean, they're a fungus. They're a mushroom head thing. And she's like, zombie, not watching it. So anyway, so basically what they did in The Last of Us is they wanted to connect you deeply to the main character, who's a middle-aged man. And this middle-aged man, they know the thrust of the story is this middle-aged man is this 11-year-old girl is thrust upon him, her safety, her well-being, her everything. And I feel like they knew, and again, I'm not a part of Naughty Dog, so I'm not in the writer's room. I don't know. I'm just using my big brain to kind of extrapolate things. But I feel like they were like, well, wait a minute now. The player is going to be playing a middle-aged man, and he has to deeply care about this 11-year-old girl that the player, because again, they're the only thing that's real, that Joel, the player, has just met 5 seconds ago. Like, how do we do that? And so what they did is they actually make Joel a single father before the outbreak. You actually play the girl. You don't start the game as Joel. You started as the 11-year-old girl, and you actually miss almost everything. Some weird things are going on, but you've got other things that you're worried about in your life. You have to get this, you have to get that, whatever. And you end up going to sleep, and then you wake up and like dad's gone, and you're wandering around and you get scared by this thing. And then all of a sudden dad shows up and there's military everywhere and there's all this stuff and you don't understand anything. And then you die, and you die right at that moment where you switch POVs to Joel. And now you're Joel, and you're holding your 11-year-old daughter that you now care about because you were her for the last 20 minutes, as he tries to lie to her, because she's dead. She got shot by a machine gun, and he's trying to hold her guts in, and he's like, you're gonna be okay, baby, you're gonna be okay. It's breathtakingly heart-wrenching, especially if you're a parent. And they kept it intact. And even to the point where in the show, you don't even you still follow her. The camera stays with her. So when she goes to sleep, Joel's like, well, I got to go out. Your uncle was thrown in jail. I got to go deal this. And you already know some weird stuff's going on. And then you just go to sleep, and the camera fades to black. And then it fades back. It's like 2:00 in the morning. You have no idea what, they did such a great job with that because there was no reason to change it. A lot of people go, well, but we want to do it different because it's already been done. Yeah, it's been done to a video game market.
Yes.
Most people don't play video games. Even though video games is the #1 money-making industry in entertainment, most people still watch TV and movies. It's just the way it is. So, yes, you're going to have people like me and you played the game. So people like us that have played the game, and we're going to just live through the exact same thing we just lived.
But guess what? Those people are going to be like, oh my God, they kept it. Yeah. They kept the opening, and they're going to love it.
Yeah.
I feel
and all the new people are going to have the exact same giddy experience that we gamers had when we experienced it the first time.
Exactly.
So, and it is a different medium. So you do feel about it different. You do get to watch actors acting it as opposed to just a video game, because acting is much more powerful than just what can be done. Even as good looking as video games are today, the cutscenes still are not as impactful as live action people actually doing it. So you aren't really double dipping. Yeah, obviously everyone who played the video game is going to watch the TV show. But that's just your built-in market. The reality is that the vast majority, a bigger percentage of the people that are watching that have never seen it before than the people who have. And so you really are still touching a brand new market with this, even though you're just doing something some other writer did, and they did it perfectly.
But to get back to the time jump thing.
Yeah. So, and that's where I was getting to. When you jump forward 20 years, it's still the exact same Joel. It's still the broken man that 3 seconds ago in the film was holding his dying daughter, lying to her that she's going to be okay, that she's, that everything is fine, that you're there, that you're going to protect her, when there's literally nothing you can do. He's the same guy. And just like my little example of, the child watching her parents die and then showing up later as a teenager scrapping out a living, what he experienced during those 20 years. The self-loathing, the hate, the just I want to kill myself, that I've given up, that the only thing that ever mattered to me, I could do nothing to protect. And so what this magically does is, when he is then forced to take upon the safety of yet another 11-year-old girl, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to do better this time. I'm not going to fail this time. It's the Finding Nemo all over again.
Yeah.
Why do we agree with the father when he's like, you don't need to go to school. You can just be ignorant. Just stay home. Just don't do anything. Don't do anything. We're like, yeah, no, you should do that. I mean, that's cruel. I would never want a child to have no education whatsoever. Why? Because I understand the misery of losing the other children, and how terrifyingly painful it would be to let that child go.
Now, the reason why I think House of the Dragon's time jumps didn't work for me is because the relationships between the characters changed in those time jumps.
Which is, if you take a step back and go, well, wait a minute, in the real world, this would be different. Yes, you are right. In the real world, more than likely, Joel changed drastically in those 20 years. I mean, civilization fell.
Yeah.
This is a
Of
story.
course he should have changed. But I'm not watching for a real world analysis of the effect of of what happens to a man
Yeah.
when his daughter gets shot, like, and it's 20 years later. I'm watching to
Well,
be entertained.
it goes back to what I said earlier.
Yeah.
Joel ain't real.
Yeah.
The reader is, and the reader just lost their daughter 5 seconds ago. And now, even though in the story world we've jumped forward 20 years, the reader has only jumped ahead 5 seconds.
Correct.
So the pain of losing the daughter is still incredibly fresh to them. So by whitewashing it and going, well, it's 20 years ago, I had to move on with my life. And, now I have a lover and I've had another child and I've, done all this other stuff and life has changed. I've lost a limb. Like he didn't lose a limb. I'm just saying, if you want to make it realistic.
That's what would have happened. But that's not what the reader wants to experience.
No.
And so you need to be cognizant of that. Because that I strongly feel is why the two time jumps didn't, why there's this difference in the time jumps.
Yeah, I agree. Because
the other thing
now you have to get to know this new character, even though it's the same name.
It's a new
in House
character.
of Dragons. You're now basically having to decide if you like this character
every freaking episode, you have to decide if you like this character all over again. And that's what kind of got to me. That and The Last of Us left me with questions. So this is the same discussion as I had with Rings of Power. Rings of Power was not a great TV series by any stretch of the imagination. Not by any stretch of the imagination. But it did leave me asking questions at the end of each episode. Because I did wonder who Meteor Man was and that kind of stuff. Do you understand what I'm saying?
We didn't go into this the last time we brought this up, but I do want to take a devil's advocate. This is where it wasn't where we were going.
Yeah.
So this is the J.J. Abrams What's in the Box.
Yes.
And it worked well for some reason with Lost.
Yes.
And I think the reason why it worked well with Lost is because it wasn't the only trick in the toolbox.
100%.
Because you cared about the characters, you cared about their little individual stories, their individual struggles, their individual everything. In Rings of Power, the only thing they had was J.J. Abrams' What's in the Box.
100%.
You didn't give a crap about the characters. You didn't give a crap about their stories. They didn't grow anybody. No. They didn't.
100%. But let me finish.
All right, I will let you finish.
I'm also a Tolkien nerd geek. I love Tolkien's world. So I love the cities and the sets and like that kind of thing. But the problem with House of the Dragon is they didn't leave me with any questions because it is abundantly clear what the setup is here. The setup is a civil war. Yeah. It is the only thing that is impacting the story is that civil war.
Yeah. And when you said that earlier before we started filming, I had made the comment of, well, so is Game of Thrones. And you had a great rebuttal to that. You were like, yeah, but they had an external.
They had the White Walkers, the others in the books, as an external threat. So there was there was the Civil War, but there was also external threats.
Right.
There was magic.
And that was a really good rebuttal, and I hadn't thought about it like that.
And I cared about the characters. I constantly cared about the characters. Now, the problem with a Civil War setup is you really need me to care about at least one of those characters. And when you're making me decide every episode whether I care about those characters and you're not leaving me with questions, it's not that it's a bad TV series that I'm slamming. It's that I don't have enough of a connection to it to go back to it.
Well, the both of us are like, no, House of Dragons is a good story. And then I was like, I have to admit, because this happened before we started filming too. I was like, I actually didn't finish it. And you were like, I didn't finish it either. It's like,
now, here's the thing. Last of Us connected me to Joel. It connected me to Joel's lover, right? Which you meet only after the 20 years. It connected me to the 11-year-old girl and her potty mouth.
Yes.
She swears like a sailor, that one. And it left me with questions. Because the girl seems to be immune. Now, is she really immune? Is there something? Is there a cure? Where is Tommy? Right? Are they going to make... I have questions that I need answered. And that is the combination you're looking for. Interest in the characters and questions.
And you care about these characters.
Yes. And that's what
I'm not going to say that you care about Ellie yet.
Yeah.
You
don't care about her, but you know, like.
But you care about Joel.
Yes. And an 11-year-old kid is always coming from a good place. You know, it's hard not to.
And that's the only thing that's one change that I think they messed up on, because she is 14, 15.
Yeah.
Somewhere around in there in this.
I know why, because 11-year-old is hard to act with. You know, child actors. Oh my goodness.
But here's the thing. People do see other people different as they depending on their age. When someone's 10 and 11, you treat them and see them in a very, and it doesn't matter how progressive you are, they're still just a child. At 14, 15, they're still just a child, but they're also starting to, you know, understand more adult oriented stuff. And so you start treating them, you know, my kids are now 18 and 20. So I've gone through the whole gambit from diapers to, you know, 2 grown men living in my house and eating my food. So like, there's the whole gambit of it. And so it is less impactful.
I agree. It is less impactful, but I do understand the change of medium and why they took the decision to make her slightly older. I mean, I get it.
Oh, certainly. You know, I'm just saying that's one change that, like, I probably would have fought pretty hard for. Like, it's my story. I'm the director. I'm, you know, in charge of that.
It's so hard to work with child actors.
Harry Potter, they were all 10 and 11.
Yeah.
They made a whole movie.
But for every Harry Potter, there's like, you know,
there's an Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
the mannequin, as I like to call it.
Yeah. You know, for every good child actor, there's like 5 bad ones.
We're gonna be attacked by the Alliance. We need to to fight. I'm gonna steal this plane and woohoo! Look at me. I'm gonna fight on a starship and
exactly. So my point is that I think that Last of Us really got that combination right. That character driven along with the what's in the box question.
Yeah.
Rings of Power the only thing it had going for it was what's in the box. That's it.
Yeah.
That and
that's enough for some people. That's why it's not a terrible show.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't get horrible ratings.
If you really love Tolkien's world, then the cities were beautiful. They were really, really well done. It was gorgeous. It was everything I expected the cities to be. So the set design was lovely. A lot of the other things left a lot to be desired. Like, let's just say that. There were relationships that I liked, like Elrond and his dwarven buddy. That was gorgeous, and they stole the show.
Well, I wouldn't say gorgeous, but it was definitely the highlight of.
Yeah, it was the highlight of the show. You know,
because I only watched.
Yeah.
What, the first 2 episodes, maybe?
Yeah. So their relationship was really like. But
even like Elrond, I was watching a YouTuber about it a while ago, and he did a really good job because he's a storyteller YouTuber. Yeah. I don't follow him, so this is the only video I've ever seen of him, but I should probably look him up because he had some really good points. But he was like, you know, look at the Elrond character and what they could have done.
Plenty of missed opportunity.
Well, so in that scene, he goes, the only thing I've ever wanted to do is work with this one master builder. Like, it's so amazing. And they set everything up for this perfect, oh, well, you're a hack. You'll never work with that guy. And then let Elrond earn his place. No, literally, he goes, oh, I've always, you know, that's always been my dream to work with. And he goes, really? Well, you're in luck because behind curtain number 1 is the guy and he's going to hire you as your apprentice. And it's like,
the speed with which they moved left me I was like, my dudes, you're literally summarizing about 3 seasons worth of content into episodes. And that's why it didn't land. Because that's why the end scene...
Well, you don't care about the characters. Elrond earned nothing in that scene, so you don't give a crap about Elrond.
Exactly.
None of them did. Even Galadriel didn't do anything, and so you don't care.
Yeah.
If you don't, again, that's why
why it didn't
Last
land.
of Us works.
Yes.
I mean, what happens in The Last of Us? What actually happens?
The dude runs away from zombies, and his daughter gets shot.
But we don't even really see the dude run away from zombies.
Yeah. We see a bit in the town, like you're driving around. I did, by the way, really appreciate the camera angles. Like I'm not a cinematographer, but I loved the way that occasionally, just sometimes, you would get a little bit of that first-person feeling.
That video game feel. Yeah. Yeah, that was actually really good.
And it wasn't everything. It was just here and there. You were like, holy shit, it feels like I'm sitting in the back of this truck looking out. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, when you were still the daughter.
Yeah, when you were still the daughter.
In that scene. So you're looking at Uncle
Tom,
Uncle Tom and your dad.
Yeah.
And you're looking out the window. You're looking here and you're looking out the window. And yeah, that was really, really well done.
Spot on.
Now,
but anyway, so not a lot happens in terms of story progression in those chapters, but a lot happens in terms of building me into the character, and investing me in the world. And that is what, like, it was the downfall of Rings of Power, is that speed with which they just cantered to what they thought was the climax. It was the downfall of Game of Thrones, was the speed with which they ripped through those last seasons.
Yeah.
You know,
it's been my downfall and the difference between the industry and my fan base. So when I do work with the industry, the number one gripe that the industry has on me is that every time your stories start off too slow. You need to really get right into the meat of it. And all my fans are like, I love everything about this. This is so freaking amazing. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change for you, the industry, because you're wrong. Like the people, the only thing that's real in this equation, want to fall in love with the character first before I start kicking him in the teeth. Kicking him in the teeth, and I told the story about, my first professional editor and making me change the first book and moving the Lion Dude. And I've already told that story a couple of times. That is the way I feel. And so I'm going to start my stories off. I don't care about the action and all that. I want to first make sure that you love the character. Now, you still have to add conflict. You have to make it interesting. You have to make them want to continue reading. You can't just have this boring. So when I say my stories start off slow, they're not boring.
Yes.
They're just different types of conflict other than the conflict that the fantasy story is going to be about.
And I think that, that to me, I think is a takeaway that we should end the show on, is like, take the time to invest your readers in the character, but don't do it in a conflictless way. Don't do it by, giving the long backstory of the character. In fact, go watch our episode on how to introduce your character for advice on exactly that. Make sure that there is conflict, but small scale conflict, little conflicts. Show the character to the reader. Let them get invested.
Or as one of my Dracons is, I can make the reader feel anything I want them to feel. How? I connect them to the character, and then I do whatever to the character that I want the reader to feel. How do you connect them to the character? You have to do that first. Everything else falls in play after that. If you do not connect the reader to the character, you do not own the reader. And therefore, you cannot make the reader feel what you want them to feel when you want them to feel it.
Exactly.
It's that simple. It's not this stuff. I mean, I am not the sharpest tool in the shed. And if I can figure this stuff out, anybody can figure this stuff out. So it literally is that simple. It's all care. And that again, that goes to, so we talked about 3 different shows, one that was garbage, one that was, not bad, but not great. And then one that's fan-stingatastic. But also when you look at the reviews of all of them, House of Dragons is running around a 3.5 to 4 out of 10. I'm sorry.
Rings of Power
running a 3.5, 4 out of 10. House of Dragons running around a 6 to 7 out of 10. And I think right now The Last of Us sitting at like 9.8 with like 20,000 reviews. So it's not even like one dude liked it.
Yeah.
Like it's overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
And the big difference between the 3 is in how they connect the reader to. And it's also why the video game won every single game award the year it came out. Not a single award went to any other game than The Last of Us.
Absolutely.
Because it was that impactful to the gaming market.
So,
which is why I was terrified when they were going to make it into.
Yeah, me too.
They ruined everything. everything.
I'm hoping that Ghost of Tsushima, which they're also making into a movie, which I really like, I loved as a video game. I'm hoping that they make a good job with Ghost of Tsushima based on how The Last of Us went. Like, fingers crossed.
Who's making it?
I don't know. It's a Japanese studio, as far as I know.
Maybe.
Which makes sense
Maybe. You
because
might
it's a
have some luck with that.
Japanese. It's a
I
Japanese
mean,
writer.
you can't say. I mean, even like HBO is the one who greenlit The Last of Us.
Yeah.
But they also greenlit Velma.
Yeah. So
which may end up being the lowest rated TV show in the history of TV.
The one they hit it out the ballpark. The other one is, I don't even think you can describe
The
it as
other
a swing and a miss.
the other one, no, it wasn't even a swing and a miss. They stood up out of the batter's box. They stood out of the dugout. They started walking toward the field. They tripped, stabbed the bat through their neck, and killed themselves. They never even got to the batter's box. So no, was so not a swing and a miss at all. They literally never made it there. Yeah. They were DOA.
Yeah. Ring of Power was a swing and a miss. Velma was.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, what did you think of Rings of Power, The Last of Us, House of the Dragon? Did you connect with the characters? Let us know in the comments below. And we will see you soon for another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon.
Bye.